My name is Ethan Cole, I'm 42 years old, and I used to believe that hard work always paid off. I was wrong. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and for nearly a decade, I poured everything I had into a company I helped build from the ground up. I wasn't just another employee. I was the guy who worked late when everyone went home. I was the guy who took calls at 3 a.m. from panicked clients. I was the one who created the sales pipeline that took us from struggling to $12 million in annual revenue. I didn't just hit targets. I crushed them. And then, one Tuesday morning, I was called into the conference room and handed a termination letter. No reason. No thank you. No warning. Just, we're going in a new direction. The room was ice cold. I remember looking down at my name on the paper, thinking, how does someone get discarded this easily? I couldn't even feel anger yet. I was still in shock. The worst part? The man who fired me had been with the company for less than 2 months. A newly hired president, clean suit, shiny smile, but not a damn clue about what we'd built. And what none of them knew is that I kept receipts. Every deal. Every broken promise. Every shortcut they took while I worked myself into the ground. I didn't walk out angry. I walked out quiet, but my silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Because 2 weeks later, the new president made a discovery that sent a wave of panic through the entire executive floor. He realized something they all missed. And by the time they came knocking on my door, it was already too late. They thought they could erase me. But I had one final move left. And when I made it, their entire foundation cracked. Show Ethan's before, a hopeful, loyal, trusting professional life. Create contrast before the betrayal. Drop light red flags, subtle, not obvious yet. When I first joined Onyx Tech Solutions, we were operating out of a co-working space with shared Wi-Fi and borrowed chairs. There were only 7 of us, barely enough to form 2 teams. I was the 8th. Freshly laid off from my last job, I wasn't looking for stability. I was looking for purpose. I found it when I met Glenn Marsh, the founder. He had a vision, a crazy one, to take on enterprise IT support firms that had 10 times our funding and 20 times our staff. Everyone thought he was delusional, but I didn't. Because when I looked at his model, I saw something they didn't: scalability. He hired me as director of sales and client success. I didn't even negotiate the offer. I just said, let me prove what I can do. I worked without bonuses the first year, just a base salary and a small equity promise. I didn't care. I believed in what we were building. Within 18 months, we landed our first 7-figure client. And I was just getting started. I built a CRM from scratch, trained a lean team of 5, and restructured our onboarding system so well that client retention jumped to 92%. By year 3, Glenn made me VP of Operations and Strategy. We had moved into a proper office in downtown Minneapolis. We had a team of 40. And we'd hit $4.2 million in annual revenue. Glenn trusted me. Or so I thought. We celebrated wins like family. Late Friday night pizza. Cold beers in the conference room after closing a contract. Everyone said it felt different here. It wasn't just a job, it was ours. And for a while, I was happy. I was married to a beautiful woman, Sophie, who supported my insane hours. We had a modest home, no kids by choice, just peace. I used to joke that I spent more time at Onyx than I did in my own living room. And she'd laugh. She got it. Or at least she used to. The company became my identity. My numbers were used in investor decks. Glenn once said, if I ever step down, Ethan's taking the wheel. But things slowly started to shift. At first, it was subtle. Glenn started showing up late to meetings. He deferred more and more to consultants. The board had grown, and now there were unfamiliar faces at strategy sessions. People who spoke in buzzwords but never once talked to the frontline staff. Then came the acquisition rumors. It started as whispers. One of the board members was in talks with a private equity firm, Bellingham Capital, I believe. I didn't think much of it. We were killing it. Why sell? But Glenn changed. Suddenly, my opinions were being second-guessed. I was being asked to justify decisions I used to make freely. And then I got word from a junior HR rep, off the record, that a president role was being discussed. A role that would sit between me and Glenn. I should have seen it coming. But I didn't. Because I was too busy doing the work that actually built the business. I was too busy finalizing a contract with a Fortune 500 company, one that would push us past the $12 million mark. I was too busy mentoring my team, tracking KPIs, cleaning up messes no one else even saw. I was too busy keeping the machine running to realize they were preparing to replace me. Looking back now, there were signs. Glenn stopped CCing me on investor emails. The board started referring to me as support staff in one internal deck I later found. And then there was Julian Tate, the consultant who kept showing up in meetings and taking notes. The guy had never worked a frontline sales day in his life, yet somehow had an opinion about our funnel conversion rates. Julian would later become the new president, the one who fired me. But back then, he was just the guy who smiled too much, talked too little, and made me feel like I was slowly becoming invisible in a company I helped create. Still, I kept working, because that's what loyal people do. They work harder when they feel uncertain. They convince themselves that output will protect them. I signed the $12 million deal in the first week of Q4. I remember emailing Glenn, subject line, "We did it." He didn't reply. But Sophie smiled when I told her. She said, "You've done everything right. No one can take that away." She didn't know how wrong she'd be. Because 3 weeks later, I'd walk into a room where 3 people I barely knew would thank me for everything I've contributed, hand me a severance check, and ask for my badge. I told them I understood. I shook their hands. I even smiled. But as I walked out, one thought kept echoing in my mind. You fired the wrong man. Now Ethan's been fired. We explore his slow realization of the truth, betrayal, confusion, deep hurt, and the flicker of revenge starting to burn that I remember sitting in my car for over an hour after they let me go. The Minneapolis cold crept through the windows, but I didn't feel it. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even sad. I was numb. 12-hour days. For years. Multi-million-dollar deals. Training teams. Fixing everything Glenn ignored. Gone, with a generic HR script and a printed severance check. I kept staring at the envelope in my hand, as if looking long enough would change the number. It didn't.
$84,000. That's what they thought I was worth. 1 week per year served. A thank you, packaged in corporate policy. I told Sophie that night. She was in shock. Not just at what happened, but how casually it had been done. She said all the right things. They don't deserve you. You will bounce back. You should sue them. But I didn't want to sue. I didn't want justice. I wanted answers. For the first few days, I tried to convince myself it was just business. Maybe Glenn had investor pressure. Maybe they thought I was too expensive. Maybe they just outgrew me. But something didn't sit right. The timeline was too clean. The new president, Julian, started 2 days after I left. Not interim. Not acting. Full authority. That kind of move doesn't happen overnight. That means contracts were signed, decisions made, strategies locked, while I was still working my ass off. They knew they were replacing me. Hell, they probably discussed it over beers while I was presenting our Q3 win rate. And I wasn't the only one. 2 other VPs were let go within weeks, both replaced by people from Bellingham Capital's portfolio companies. Outsiders. Strangers. Hired guns. I started piecing it together. This wasn't a pivot. This was a takeover. Glenn had sold his soul. Probably traded control for a fat exit package. And in the process, he gutted the leadership that built the damn rocket ship he was now riding to the moon. One night, around 2 a.m., I logged into an old Slack workspace, one they forgot to revoke access to. Buried in a private channel, I found a message from a board advisor, sent 3 weeks before I was fired. Once Julian's in, we clean house. Ethan goes first. Too much influence with the team. Too much influence? I wasn't a threat. I was the reason those people stayed through the chaos, through underpaid months, through late-night support tickets. And now? I was an obstacle. That's when something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I wasn't going to ask for what I had earned. No. I was going to burn the fantasy down they built on my back. That week, I went full ghost mode. No calls. No posts. No explanations. I started building a file. Every document, email, proposal, idea that had originated from me. I had contracts that bore my signature, processes that bore my initials, slides from internal decks that Julian had presented word for word to investors just 2 weeks ago. I had proof. But more than that, I had people. Old clients started reaching out. Where are you? Why aren't you on calls? Is it true what we heard? I didn't answer at first. But when I did, I told them the truth. Politely. Calmly. I've moved on. But if you ever need strategy help, my personal email is always open. 5 of those clients emailed me back in 48 hours. 2 asked if I'd ever considered launching my own firm. And that's when the thought hit me. What if I stopped looking for a seat at someone else's table and built my own? The very idea lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. They thought they could erase me with a signed form and a generic exit memo. But what they didn't know was, I wasn't just a cog in the machine. I was the architect. In the weeks that followed, I worked in silence. Registered an LLC, Gray North Systems. Leased a small office just outside the city. Recruited 2 ex-Onyx employees who'd also been sidelined. Rebuilt my CRM from scratch. No funding. No safety net. Just grit, and a list of clients who already trusted me more than they ever trusted Julian. My first signed contract came from a former client who said, "Honestly, we stayed with Onyx because of you. The minute you left, it all fell off." That deal covered my rent for 6 months. It wasn't just business. It was personal. Every win was fuel. Every email I got from a former coworker saying, "They're floundering without you," was another brick in the fire pit. But I stayed quiet. No public rant. No lawsuits. No headlines. I didn't need to scream. I was going to let results speak. Because what they didn't know was, I was watching. Every move. Every fumble. Every time Julian took credit for my work, he was digging the company's grave one speech at a time. And I was just getting started. They thought I was broken. But I was just sharpening my blade. Ethan is calm, calculated, and working silently. He begins to set up a bigger play, and we see early cracks forming in Onyx. This part builds tension, curiosity, and sets up the downfall. I didn't post a single thing about Onyx on social media. No rant. No hints. No explanations. The silence made them nervous. I could feel it. Former coworkers started texting me. "Julian keeps asking where you landed. Glenn's on edge. Your name came up in the board meeting." I'd become a ghost they couldn't bury. But I wasn't hiding. I was studying. Every time Onyx updated their site, I saved a snapshot. Every time a client told me about new product changes, I took notes. Every time Julian posted some hollow thought leadership piece, I dissected the lies. They had no idea that I was tracking their every move, not out of bitterness but strategy. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice, delivered with precision. 3 weeks after my first client signed, I landed my second. It wasn't a small deal. It was one of Onyx's biggest clients, and they came to me quietly. "We're not supposed to reach out," the VP said on a call, "but things haven't been the same without you." I didn't ask them to leave Onyx. I didn't even pitch. All I said was, "If you ever need someone who actually listens, I'm here." The contract came in 2 days later. A $220,000 retainer. Just like that. And that's when I made my next move. I called a guy I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Ravi Patel. An operations genius. Used to run logistics for a billion-dollar supply chain startup. Got burned by his last founders. I knew he was good. Honest. Hungry. I brought him on as COO. A week later, we hired a young product manager from Austin who used to work under me. Then a designer from Seattle. Then a data guy who left Onyx after Julian tried to cut his pay. We were a ghost team. Remote. Quiet. Fast. No press. No PR. Just work. We rebuilt everything I had designed at Onyx, but this time, it was ours. Cleaner. Smarter. Faster. One of my former engineers called me in secret. He'd seen the roadmap Julian was pushing internally. "Dude, half of it is yours," he whispered. "They're just rebranding your features." I laughed. It was expected. But what Onyx didn't realize was, I wasn't the only one they underestimated. Clients weren't happy. Turnover was climbing. Their latest product launch had bugs so bad, one of my former clients told me, "We're bleeding users every day. What happened to the old dev team?" They happened. Glenn and Julian happened. They traded loyalty for control, but they didn't realize control means nothing when no one trusts you. Then came the day that changed everything. One of my early clients, the second one I signed, reached out in a panic. "Ethan," she said, "we just got approached by Glenn directly. He's trying to poach our account manager. They're scared." "Scared of what?" I asked, knowing the answer. "You? Whatever you're building, they feel it coming." I smiled. The thing was, I hadn't announced anything publicly yet. No site. No launch. No product teasers. Just whispers. That's all it took. Because in this industry, perception is currency. And right now, Onyx was hemorrhaging trust. That night, I opened my laptop and crafted a letter. Not to Glenn. Not to Julian. To Onyx's board of directors. Subject line: "To those who built on broken ground, a memo from Ethan Marsh." Inside, I laid it all out. No threats. No rage. Just truth. A timeline of everything I contributed. Slides they reused. Features they renamed. Client quotes. Screenshots. Documents. Evidence. And at the end, I wrote, "I built the engine that carried you through Series A, B, and C. You threw me overboard because I didn't play politics. Now you're sinking, and it's not the storm. It's the weight of your own deception." I didn't send it. Not yet. I just saved it. Because timing is everything. 3 days later, something wild happened. Julian followed me on LinkedIn. No message. No like. Just a follow. I stared at that notification for a good minute. That's when I knew. They weren't just scared of me rebuilding. They were scared I might speak. And I was almost ready to. But I had one more card to play. The strike, going public, getting even. They fired me to protect their throne. But they forgot I was the one who built the kingdom. Ethan finally goes public. He exposes everything, launches his product, and delivers a massive blow to Onyx, professionally and psychologically. It was a Thursday morning when I hit post. A simple update on LinkedIn. We're live. Introducing Ember, the platform I wish I had when I was still building for someone else. No politics. No power games. Just product done right. There was no rant. No shade. No names. But people knew. The post got 6,200 reactions in 48 hours. Comments came flooding in. Didn't they steal this from you? This looks like what Onyx promised 2 years ago. Finally, a product led by someone who actually listens. And just like that, the narrative shifted. I wasn't just a founder anymore. I was a phoenix. Burned, banished, but rising. And everyone was watching, including Glenn and Julian. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Julian's voice. Tight. Controlled. Hey Ethan. I saw your post. Looks promising. Listen, no hard feelings, right? Would be great to catch up. Maybe even explore how we can coexist. Coexist? The man who tried to bury me alive now wanted peace? I didn't reply. Instead, I posted part 2 of the story. A blog titled, Why I Left. Except I didn't just write about my departure. I documented it. Screenshots. Slack messages. Timelines. Ideas that got rejected and then reused without credit. Not as revenge, as clarity. People deserve to know who builds the things they love. It went viral. Reddit picked it up. TechCrunch emailed me the next day. Do you want to comment on the rift between you and Onyx? I replied with just one line. There's no rift. I'm just building what they wouldn't let me. Meanwhile, Onyx? They panicked. 3 of their clients, all quietly, requested feature freezes. Translation: they were preparing to switch. Their engineering lead resigned. Their Series D funding announcement got delayed. Investors were asking too many questions. One of my sources inside told me Glenn nearly flipped a table in a meeting when someone asked, What if Ethan starts eating our enterprise clients? Too late. I already had. But the biggest hit wasn't business. It was reputation. The illusion of control is what kept Glenn and Julian powerful. Now, people were asking questions they couldn't answer. Who really built Onyx's core platform? Why did Ethan leave? Why does Ember feel so much better? Suddenly, their silence looked like guilt. And my silence? It looked like grace. 1 week after the launch, I received a package. No name. Inside? A bottle of whiskey and a handwritten note. You did what most of us only dream about. We're rooting for you. A former Onyx employee. I stared at the note for a long time. Because that's when it hit me. This was never just about me. It was about everyone who had ever been silenced, sidelined, or sacrificed so someone else could take credit. This was bigger than revenge. This was restoration. Then the biggest blow landed. One of Onyx's lead investors publicly announced they were pivoting their capital to Ember. The same VC who backed Onyx's Series A? He called me personally. Ethan, we bet on the wrong horse. But we believe in founders who rise after getting knocked down. $6.5 million. Closed in 2 weeks. I posted nothing about the raise. But TechCrunch leaked it. And that was the final crack. 3 days later, Glenn tried to DM me. You got what you wanted. Just stop dragging this out. I didn't reply. Because I wasn't dragging anything. I was building. And here's the funny thing. I never once said their names. Never once wrote Onyx in a single public post. But everyone knew. Because truth doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs to be unleashed. I didn't destroy Onyx. They did that to themselves. All I did was stop protecting their lies. Ethan reflects on the chaos, the consequences, and the deeper truth of what revenge really means, and what it doesn't. People think revenge feels like a victory parade. It doesn't. It feels like silence. The kind that settles in your chest after the noise fades. After the headlines die down. After the DMs stop flooding in. After the final post goes live, and the notifications stop buzzing. It's just you, staring at the screen, and asking yourself quietly, now what? 6 months later, Ember was thriving. We had 28 employees. Revenue was healthy. Retention was near perfect. I should have been celebrating. But something didn't feel right. Because for a long time, I thought I wanted to win. But what I really wanted was to be seen. And I finally was. But not in the way I expected. I wasn't the underdog anymore. I was the founder. The builder. The disruptor. People looked at me differently. Some with admiration. Some with envy. Some with quiet expectation. Don't mess this up. Don't become like them. And that's when it hit me. Revenge is a mirror. You stare into it too long. And you risk becoming the thing you once hated. Glenn? Gone from Onyx. Board pushed him out quietly. The news never said why. Julian? Still there. But he doesn't post anymore. The silence speaks louder than anything he ever said. I never reached out. Not because I'm bitter, but because I've finally made peace with something. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes, it's just about removing yourself from the fire, and then watching it burn down without you. People ask me now, would you do it all over again? Yes, but not for revenge. Not even for the money. I'd do it again because I reclaimed myself. Every time I said no to ego. Every time I hit publish without naming names. Every time I chose to build instead of destroy. I became someone stronger than I was before. Not just a founder. A man who knows his worth, with or without applause. This isn't a story about enemies. It's a story about boundaries. About what happens when you stop waiting for validation and start defining your own voice. About what happens when the quiet kid in the corner finally decides, I'm done playing small. I'm done shrinking. I'm done making other people comfortable while I burn. If you're listening to this right now, and you're where I was, sidelined, silenced, passed over, discarded, hear me. You are not the version of you they abandoned. You are the version of you that rose anyway. That's the real revenge. Not the post. Not the press. Not the product. But the peace that comes from knowing. I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves. All I did was stop protecting their lies. And as for me, I'm still building. Not because I have something to prove, but because I don't anymore. And that's freedom.